So friends, Donald Trump and his lawyers just filed a 5-page motion in his criminal case in Washington, D.C., and let me tell you, it is one for the history books, and not in a good way. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, in my 30 years as a federal prosecutor, I wrote a lot of briefs. I read a lot of briefs. I mean, more court filings than I could ever count. And I just read a 4.5-page pleading that was submitted in Donald Trump's federal prosecution in Washington, D.C. That's the one where he is indicted for trying to unlawfully, unconstitutionally overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. It's the case that Judge Tanya Chutkan is presiding over. And this 4.5-page court filing may be the single most outrageous, unprofessional, and irresponsible court filing I've ever seen. It reads like it was written by a Donald Trump public relations flack, or maybe an assistant campaign manager. It is all projection, Donald Trump projecting onto others the kind of corrupt criminal conduct that he has engaged in himself. Basically, it reads like an extended rant that you might see Donald Trump post on his third-rate social media platform. He rails against the judge, he rails against the prosecutors, he rails against President Biden. Here is the motion, the court filing from Donald Trump and his lawyers. It's titled, President Trump's Response to Media Coalition's Motion for Audio-Visual and Application of NBC Universal Media to Permit Video and Audio. In other words, it's a motion saying Donald Trump wants cameras in the courtroom. I am not going to read the whole thing, but let me give you a flavor, a random sampling of some of what Donald Trump and his lawyers put in this pleading and then filed in federal court. He says things like, aware that its charges are meritless, the prosecution has sought to proceed in secret, forcing the nation and the world to rely on biased, second-hand accounts coming from the Biden administration and its media allies. He alleges that the prosecutors know that, quote, the charges are meritless, that the grand jury indicted against Donald Trump. There's more. The prosecution has repeatedly denied him, Trump, his fundamental constitutional rights. At every turn, the court, now lashing out at Judge Chutkan, the court has, at the prosecution's urging, denied President Trump his inalienable rights, including, without limitation, the rights to a fair trial in a politically diverse venue, due process, a judge without the appearance of bias or prejudgment, prepare for trial, and the right to speak freely and publicly about this case in the face of the prosecution's egregious lies. It continues, the Biden administration is unlawfully and unconstitutionally attempting to eliminate its leading political opponent. They then go on to claim that everything the prosecutors do, they do with the aim of winning an unjust conviction. And then flipping to the last page. In sum, President Trump absolutely agrees and in fact demands that these proceedings should be fully televised so that the American public can see firsthand that this case, just like others, is nothing more than a dreamt-up unconstitutional charade that should never be allowed to happen again. And friends, Jack Smith and his team of prosecutors promptly filed a response to this embarrassment of a court filing submitted by Donald Trump and his lawyers. And it's also about 4 pages long. And here is just some of what Jack Smith says in reply to Donald Trump's unhinged rants in the court filing. The defendant's response does not cite a single rule or case in support of his position because there are none. The defendant's response is a transparent effort to demand special treatment, try his case in the courtroom of public opinion, and turn his trial into a media event. Trump desires to create a carnival atmosphere from which he hopes to profit by distracting, like many fraud defendants try to do, from the charges against him. This scenario is not hypothetical. As the court has already observed in proceedings in the defendant's criminal trial, the defendant and his counsel will, if permitted, design their in-court statements instead to wage a public relations campaign. The court should decline the defendant's demand that he be placed beyond the rules and above the law. Friends, at its core, this 4.5-page court filing argues that essentially any case that is prosecuted against a political person is a, quote, political show trial, and it should not be allowed. You know, what becomes clear as you read this really embarrassment of a court filing, and you couple it with everything else Donald Trump has been saying and posting, Donald Trump knows he's going to lose this case. He knows he's going to be convicted in federal court in Washington, D.C. And because he's already concluded that he's going to lose, he's going to be convicted, he doesn't really try to offer any defense anywhere on the evidence, on the merits. Instead, he attacks the process. Why? Because he wants to undermine the public's confidence in the inevitable conviction, the guilty verdict that will be handed down by 12 jurors sitting in that jury box in that federal courtroom in Washington, D.C., serving as the conscience of the community. He knows he can't win on the evidence, so he attacks the process. He attacks the people who populate the process. He attacks the judge. He attacks the prosecutors. He attacks President Biden. Elsewhere, we've seen him attack the witnesses. But here's the thing, friends. The witnesses that will file into that courtroom in Washington, D.C., day after day after day and testify about and against Donald Trump, be placed under oath, look the jurors in their eye, and relate the evidence of the crimes Donald Trump committed, those people will be people like his chief of staff, his former attorney general, his vice president. It will be a chorus of Republican voices that stream through that courtroom testifying against a fellow Republican. So yes, Donald Trump knows that he can't win on the evidence, on the facts, so he rails against the process, he rails against the institution, he rails against everybody who is somehow related to the endeavor to hold him accountable for his crimes. But Donald Trump will be held accountable for his crimes. Because justice matters. And as always, friends, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.